I decided to wear a fitness tracker for 30 days just to see what all the fuss is about. And here's what I found out. 1, if you're doing what you're doing is working, keep doing it. I'm a pretty traditional plastic strap watch kind of guy, and I've always been pretty opposed to having another piece of technology on my wrist distracting me, is what I thought. And but I was hearing a lot of good things from patients and other people, people in the podcast community about what these devices can do for you as far as it comes to health. Talking about getting more out of workouts that you're already doing, or otherwise learning more about your, biological rhythms, track sleep, etc. So I got one, and I wore this Fitbit Inspire 2 fitness tracker plus heart rate for 30 days. And I think it was worthwhile, so here's what I learned. First is a rundown on the physical apparatus here. You can tell it's really small, it's really thin, it's really convenient. It didn't really throw off my style too much. I thought it was pretty good. It had really good battery life. I could basically charge it on Sundays, and it would be good all week long. The only real downside is there's a couple different clock faces. Maybe you can see. This is the one I ended up settling on. It's got this sleep feature where you have to turn your wrist to kind of wake it up so it doesn't burn battery. So sometimes if you're in a bad position or something, you can't turn your wrist. You don't know what time it is as opposed to a regular watch. But that's really it. It didn't have a second hand time, which I need for work. If we're doing a procedure or doing OMT or something like that. But really, other than that, it was a really nice device that I thought I was not going to like, and ended up being pretty good. It also comes with an app, and I guess you can subscribe to this 1-year premium, which has some other things that I didn't get into. I didn't get the premium, but the app is pretty easy to use. It's on your phone. It's really intuitive and simple to use, and gives you a lot of data. So, speaking of which, let's get into the good stuff. The easiest thing to point out is the utility of the heart rate tracker. As you know, on this channel, we've been a big proponent about Zone 2 cardio and what that means for your overall metabolic health and longevity. And for the most part, even when I was training, if I wasn't at a gym with a device that I could put my hands on and get a heart rate, for the most part, it was guesswork. We've talked on this channel at length about this idea that Zone 2 is this level of exercise, this moderate level activity that you should be able to have a conversation, but you're a little winded. Somebody on the phone could recognize that you're exercising. So for the largest part, a lot of my activity in that zone was a guess. It was a hunch. So what I did was I had the fitness tracker, and I was able to, for the most part, get on my favorite Zone 2 activity, which is the stationary bike we have at the house, and was able to put that on. And after a few workouts, was really able to dial in the settings and the speed at which I was working out on the exercise bike, the pace. And shortly thereafter found out that I probably didn't need that. Once I had the settings dialed in as far as resistance and kind of knew what clip I needed to be at to stay in that Zone 2, the watch became less helpful. But it was super helpful to find that information out first to make sure I was in the right zone. It did have a couple times, depending on, I don't know if it was sweat or moisture, but, I could check my heart rate and the watch was maybe 20 to 30 beats off, and then I move it around a little bit, and it would catch up. But other than that, it was super helpful to help in understanding what my heart rate was doing as far as target exercise zones during the activities that I like to do, and easy ways to make modifications about that to go up or down in heart rate to be in the ideal heart rate zone. I would also say that I was totally underestimating the effect that this device would have on my motivation. I was never a big fan that I could be convinced that this device would hold me accountable in some way, and maybe it did not, but it definitely gave me a nice little game to play. a little extra here, a little extra there, getting some steps in, getting the heart rate up if I was close to zone 2. And this thing definitely kept me accountable in that type of sense. The other thing that it's doing as far as accountability is I have always questioned this notion about where did the number 10,000 steps come from. I've always been kind of skeptical about that. And I did try to do some more research, and it doesn't look like there's a overwhelming amount of evidence that links this seemingly arbitrary 8 to 10,000 steps a day, linking that to high-quality, long-term health outcomes. That research is just not there. But what I will say is I definitely felt better. It is definitely better than sitting, and there is something about trying to get those steps in that I think absolutely has a positive benefit, whether or not we can see that in the literature or not. And it's, again, just like the stationary bike, what would happen is I found an area here at work and at the house and other, on the creeper trail. I would find out how many steps it would take to kind of get enough steps. And before you knew it, you knew kind of a general route or a path or certain activities that would help get your step count up into a reasonable area. So for me, that was an interesting part of that. I didn't think that I'd become overly competitive about trying to get those steps in. It gives you this fancy little fireworks thing when you get it, and there is something good. There's a good feeling that comes with that. And if you're at a place that you're kind of struggling with the motivation, then this could be a nice little external motivator for you, trying to get some of these fitness or health behaviors going. Kind of a nice starting point. The app that comes with the device also has a pretty cool calorie tracker where you can scan the barcodes of foods, and it kind of spits out the nutritional information and tracks that for you. So again, if you find certain foods that you're eating over and over again, whether it's a protein shake or you have the same can of chicken or whatever have you, and you have that nutritional information at your disposal and you're logging that, again, once you develop these patterns and realize that you're doing some of the same things over and over and over, you can rely less on the app and the information. And ultimately, I felt that it gave me some flexibility in knowing that if I ate certain things every morning, then that would give me a deficit to backfill the calories with what I wanted to or what I needed to without having too much pressure, because I knew that there was a known quantity accounted for in some sort of systematic way, rather. And I know that calories in, calories out is not a super home run for a bunch of people, and we've talked on the blog about this theory about the thermogenic effects of fat and how that calories in, calories out may not be as simple as it sounds and may not result in success for a lot of people, but it's definitely a good place to start to take an inventory for anybody who's not already doing that. It's a reasonable place to start. What I found to be the most fun thing for me and quickly became the most interesting part of this experiment was the sleep aspect of this. This device tracks your sleep, or it says it does. We can get into that. I will start the conversation that these trackers have been under some scrutiny from sleep doctors and other people who are looking at this, saying that it very well could be a bad data in, bad data out conversation when it comes to these devices and what they're recording as far as sleep is concerned, because they're not great, top-of-the-line, world-class ways to measure what they say that they're measuring. But I definitely think it's worth taking all this with a grain of salt and not tossing out all this information. And the reason I say this is because I could definitely tell a difference. And if you had to ask me to assign a quality score of my sleep to the nights that it gave me a bad sleep score, said that I had disrupted sleep, I would believe that. It correlated really well with how I feel. So while it may not be tracking all of this fancy information to the T, I think it's definitely helpful. And I think in a broad strokes, these devices can provide some insight and again, become a motivating factor to get your sleep back on track. What I saw was in the different categories of sleep, my goal was to see how much more deep sleep. I wanted to see if I could increase the amount of restorative sleep that I was getting. And this is a couple things that I noticed. First, only go to bed when you're tired. Once I got focused on having better sleep, it became at a certain point counterproductive for me to say I've got to go to bed at a certain time because I have to get a certain amount of hours, and maybe if I lay down at this certain time, that could increase the quality of my sleep. And that definitely wasn't the case, and sometimes it was the opposite. So it may not be the best thing to stay up all hours of the night, but there definitely would be something to said about not worrying as much about a bedtime and instead focusing on providing some high-quality relaxation in the evening time outside of the bedroom until you're absolutely ready to fall over. You know that the minute you hit that pillow, you're going to go to sleep. I think that was a big thing that I noticed. The harder you try to get the good sleep, it may not be as easy as that, and it may be counterproductive. Another interesting one, and I've experimented this based on, we've talked on this podcast about James Nestor's book, Breath, and I need a nose strip. I have a certain type, just like a lot of other people, of nose anatomy that means that I would benefit more from having this open with a nasal strip, breather out strips, whatever you want to call it, and I definitely saw a big difference on the nights when I did not wear it. I guess the theory here is that this would encourage more nose breathing in the evening, less mouth breathing, which increases the sleep quality and a bunch of other things that could signal a downstream cascade in your overall kind of health and hormone profile. And definitely, I was sick a couple days during this experiment and with a bunch of nasal congestion, and that was a killer to my sleep. Whether that was, I don't know, I wasn't taking a bunch of cold medicine, but I was stopped up. And if you cannot breathe through your nose at night, that cannot be good for your sleep quality. Another interesting and easy point toward the end of this experiment is it started to transition from this kind of nice winter weather we're having to kind of some of our first spring days that kind of got warm really quickly. And I definitely saw a drop in the sleep quality there toward the end. The bedroom was a cool 65. It was crisp without any heat. There's some air circulating, but once it started getting warmer and transitioning into air conditioning, not being able to keep it, below 70 or whatever, I definitely saw a dip. So I think there really is something to be said for this cool temperature in the bedroom, and we've talked plenty about that on sleep hygiene episode. I did try some other things that were recommended online to increase deep sleep. I know Andrew Huberman is big on magnesium supplementation, and I experimented with a couple different brands, a couple different formulations, and generally found that this was not like a super big game changer for me as far as really moving the needle on overall sleep quality. It's definitely not going to hurt, and it probably helps with a lot of things. I just didn't see a huge difference in my deep sleep, and maybe that comes down to the sensitivity of these trackers, but that was one thing. And the other thing, a couple other things that I saw online as far as things that you can do to increase deep sleep. One of them I said was increase fiber content during the day, and I found this personally largely unhelpful. It was burdensome, and I even probably had some side effects that I wouldn't have had otherwise. I tell everybody fiber is different depending on the individual. If it is great in your diet and you're doing really well on it and it helps you, then that's great. Keep it in there. But there's definitely a percentage of people that get fiber and have negative consequences. And if you're one of those folks, I wouldn't feel obligated to leave that in there. You don't have to force it. Another thing was experiment with some peak noise. We have a sound machine. Experiment with some of those different noises. I didn't see a huge difference on the tracker as it comes to this. One thing I will say, I almost forgot about exercise. I saw a big difference in the days that I exercised and the days that I did not exercise. And again, sometimes maybe that's coming back to the motivation of being able to see that information, but it definitely gave me a little bit of motivation to exercise because I had better sleep quality on the days that I exercised. And I know some people think that exercising too late in the day causes bad sleep or could interfere with your sleep, and that may be true, but even days that I exercise late compared to days when I did not exercise at all, the sleep quality was better. So I think, again, just another data point to say that this exercise is, even if it's something small, if it's 20, 30 minutes of zone 2 several times a week, or if it's some push-ups or some pull-ups or whatever you want to do, I think that that's definitely going to be a big lever to pull if you're trying to increase your overall health and well-being. So kind of in summation here, I mean, I think that these can be a pretty powerful tool for people to take an inventory of where their health is at. We've talked about a lot of different things that could be really simple, easy interventions to cause a lot of downstream effects that are positive for your health and wellness. We're talking about heart rate. We're talking about calories. We're talking about sleep. We didn't even get into heart rate variability on this. Maybe that's for another day, but I think it would be a powerful tool for you to take an inventory of where your life is at from a fitness or a health perspective. It forces you to be a little bit more accountable and actually have some hard data to visually see where you're at, how active you get, how can you get more out of the activities that you're already doing, and again, reemphasizing visually seeing how important the sleep is. And even if we're just getting a 10,000-foot view with these trackers, and even if it's not the clearest data, it's probably better than no data, if I'm being honest. So there you have it. I wore a Fitbit Inspire 2 for 30 days, and that's what I learned.